Okay, great. Usually we start these things with jokes, but I don't have a sense of humor, so I'm just going to jump right in. How many lawsuits have you filed against the Donald Trump administration since January?
Well, if I may,
Okay.
the Gophers just beat Rutgers 31-28. So keep our priorities straight here. I think we're in the mid-40s now. We're in the mid-40s now. I'd like you to know that we're doing well, even in cases where we've had some Supreme Court decisions which have removed stays. We're still very much in the fight, but mostly we're doing well. We had a good decision last week because the Trump administration said that our federal emergency management money would be tied to our police officers and law enforcement agents working for ICE. We said that's not acceptable. They got their own work to do. And we had and a court just ruled in our favor last week. So that's a good thing. And we have a lot more stories like that to tell. One of the other ones that I want to just draw to your attention is that some things go well, but they don't go well for everybody, because you all will remember right after January 20th, the president issued an executive order saying that we would not recognize birthright citizenship, which is directly in violation of the 14th Amendment, which says that people are citizens of the states that they're born in or naturalized in. So that one got up to the Supreme Court, as you know, but it didn't go up there on the merits. It went up there on the issue of whether a district court, a first level court, had the authority to issue a national injunction. You all remember this? Well, the court did not say you never can and it can't, but it certainly did say you can't always do it. It put some limits on that. So now, even though we did prevail there, we do have a national injunction on the issue. Now going forward, only the states that litigate can get relief for their state. So if you have loved ones in Alabama, Mississippi, or Louisiana, or Texas, while we're getting relief, we're getting our National Institute of Health money back, we're getting our money back from the Department of Education, we're getting money back on a number of areas. We've turned those spigots back on. They're not. And I think that's unfortunate, quite honestly. Who would have thought that whether or not you'd have equal justice in in America turns on what party your AG is in? But that's where it is.
So sometimes when I have conversations with people about all the lawsuits that have been filed over Trump executive orders, they're like, aren't all these kind of futile because isn't the US Supreme Court sympathetic to Trump? What's your response to that? I'm
so glad you asked that. The answer is absolutely, they're not futile. In fact, we're doing really well. We've gone back, and I've asked my staff to look at every single lawsuit where we've sued just for money that Congress has appropriated to Minnesota, where if we didn't sue for our money, we would not have received those resources. And we're well north of $2 billion at this point. So it really, really matters. And the Supreme Court doesn't take every case. If we end up with a good ruling at the circuit court level, and the Supreme Court does not accept what they call certiorari for you non-lawyers in here. My law professor's in the room, so she'd be disappointed if I didn't talk about this stuff. Say hi to Carol Chomsky, everybody, please. But if the Supreme Court doesn't take the case, then the ruling stands. And so we've been doing well. It is absolutely essential that we have community meetings like this, that we do public demonstration, that we litigate. All these things help protect and preserve American democracy, and the lawsuits are absolutely worth it.
So, a lot of people have talked about how overwhelming, following the Trump administration could be, the flood the zone thing that's now become kind of a cliche. If there were 3 cases that people in this audience should follow, only could have time to follow 3 cases that you filed along with other state AGs, what would those cases be?
Well, so this is a good question, and it's always a tough one. What are the 3 cases? Well, hey friends, it all turns on what matters to you, right? I just left, and one gentleman's here who said, hey, I saw you at the last event. This was a transgender weightlifting competition that your neighbors and mine are having right up on Lake Street and 27th, right over there in South Minneapolis. These are people, this is a community that is suffering persecution because of who they are, and yet they're having one heck of a good time because that's all they can do in a moment when they feel so under threat. So if you're in that community, you have a loved one who is, or if that's a concern of yours, that's the big issue, right? Well, I think this birthright citizenship is important because what the Trump administration is saying is that what the Constitution says, it doesn't say. And if he can do it there, he can do it anywhere. So that, I mean, maybe you're not the child of immigrants or the grandchild or the great-grandchild of immigrants. Maybe you're not. But for the simple idea that the Constitution says what it says and we have to go by it, that's so sort of important. Then, I mean, how many people do you know trying to figure out things like, I don't know, multiple sclerosis, ALS, cancers, don't raise your hands because I don't want you to have to do that. But my point is, all of us know somebody who would really benefit from some groundbreaking medical research. Isn't that right? Well, we're having to fight the Trump administration for money that Congress has already appropriated to us. Right. And if you live in the Red River Valley and you're worried about rivers overflowing, you might be concerned about that FEMA decision. So to make it just 3 is very difficult, but I can tell you that there's been such a spread of issues that there's something in there really important for everybody.
So James Comey, the former FBI director, was recently indicted. Are you, as someone who's so zealously gone against the Trump administration, are you afraid personally at all, or afraid on behalf of other folks like Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, that you might face prosecution for your opposition to the Trump administration?
I'm absolutely, positively not afraid at all. But that doesn't mean that it's not a realistic possibility. I mean, prosecutors who've done this kind of work for decades have reviewed the facts and said Tish James, and for that matter, James Comey, should not be charged with anything. And yet, here we are. I can tell you, I was with Tish yesterday. She's not afraid at all. And you all saw James Comey. He said, look, me and my family are ready for this. I'm not afraid. Fear is the weapon of the tyrant, and I'm not afraid. I can tell you Adam Schiff's not afraid. I ran into him not too long ago. He's not afraid. But the possibility that the justice system will be used for people who voice opposition to the president is not a possibility anymore. It is a real, live, happening thing. And then juxtapose that, friends, with Tom Homan's case. Y'all know about this? For those of you who don't know, according to news reports, Tom Homan, who is the head of Homeland Security, promised people he didn't know, but were FBI agents, that he could help steer contracts in their direction when he becomes Homeland Security Director again. And that was in exchange for $50,000 in a kava bag. Now, look, any prosecutor knows that crime's already been committed. That is either a conspiracy or an attempt to do bribery. That's a crime. It's clearly corrupt, but it's criminal action, and by all accounts, it looks like the Trump administration buried that case. So if people who are committing crimes don't have to face accountability, and people who are not do, all of us have to be concerned about what's going on. The most important thing we can do is not be afraid, because it is the avalanche of executive orders and crazy behavior plus the fear that has the possibility of immobilizing us. You follow what I'm saying? That's where at some point the mind can only digest a certain number of crazy things, and you just shut down. That's what they're banking on, but that is exactly why it's important for you to be here in MinnPost today, dealing with the issues that are most important to our country, dealing with the issues that are most important with our society, looking forthrightly, getting information, collecting information, asking questions, giving your opinion. That's what democracy is all about.
So I do want to change subjects a little bit, actually a lot. So you...
I thought you didn't have a sense of humor, man.
I'm developing one. So you filed a lawsuit against TikTok a few weeks ago. Speaking of Letitia James, she has made some headway in the lawsuit that she filed along with other state AGs about TikTok. I find this issue like really interesting because on the one hand, I read your complaint. It's exceedingly thorough. You give a whole bunch of reasons why like TikTok is destroying the mental health of teenagers. But then like at the same time, I think like, how is this different from like Tipper Gore's Parent Music Resource Center in the 1980s that like was censoring like Prince and thought like Judas Priest records were like connecting people to the devil or something like that. So like why is this something that is like a serious public health concern and not just like adults, scolding what teenagers like these days?
Now, see, this is a great question. I'm glad to be talking about this because I agree with you. Days gone by, a lot of folks who just didn't get rock and roll or they thought it was devil music or whatever, wanted to ban and suppress things like that. But I think this is different because what we can actually show that excessive TikTok usage does interfere with dietary habits of kids that have led to things like bulimia, anorexia, depression. We can show that there are very negative effects. And then there's other things like TikTok Live. Allows a person watching you live on TikTok to give you a tip. And TikTok gets a certain amount of that tip. Now, why would somebody want to give a 15-year-old girl using TikTok a tip? Or younger. But you all see my point, right? There are risks here that we should take seriously. Here's the other thing. We're not trying to ban TikTok. We don't want to get rid of TikTok. We do believe that TikTok has a right to exist, but they have to exist within guardrails. So, by the way, I never tried to shut down the vaping companies. I just said, if you're selling to adults, you got to tell them what it does, and you cannot sell to kids. And so, I'm not a proponent of the nanny state, but I believe people have a right to be warned and to know what the hazards are, and I think that juveniles are different. And so that's really kind of how we come into the case. We think we make a better case that these algorithms really do function as essentially digital nicotine. And it's extremely addictive to kids. We know that they know. And we also know that, by the way, in China, TikTok has guardrails around it. They don't have the same rules. So that's really kind of why I think there's a big difference between just banning rock and roll in the 1950s and what we're doing today.
Do you personally use TikTok much?
Not really, but I have used it. And I use other social media. I mean, I'm more of a Blue Sky guy.
Okay.
The other one who we used to use all the time, I don't use that much. You know the one. I could give you an example, but I'll just avoid that.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. That's helpful to know. Just given the time, I'll switch topics yet again. So Governor Walz was up here a couple of hours earlier and was, talking about how he wants an assault weapons ban, but so far there's been no movement to have a special session. There doesn't seem to votes to have an assault weapons ban. With that in mind, just assuming that Governor Walz fails to call a special session until the legislature meets in February, what can you do as a state attorney general to enforce existing gun laws, and which are maybe the most crucial gun laws that you can enforce that are already on the books right now in terms of addressing what Governor Walz has said is an epidemic of gun violence?
Thank you for bringing this up. I'm still sorting out what happened to Fletcher and Harper and Melissa and Mark and John and Yvette. It's incredible. These are our neighbors. Many of you knew folks who I just mentioned. The number one cause of death for people under 18 nowadays, does anybody know? Guns. It's incredible. So I left Congress. When I left Congress, I had a lot of friends who said, why are you leaving Congress? You've got a little seniority, you shouldn't leave Congress. But what I thought is, we got to enforce laws and write laws. And so one of the things that we've been doing is we've been really pursuing accountability regarding guns. So Fleet Farm, I believe that I can prove that they were selling guns in an irresponsible, negligent way, and some of those guns got mixed up in crimes, and some of those people died as a result. And so we're suing them, and we expect to be in court proving it to 12 Minnesotans, hopefully in the next year or so, because we believe that it's legal to sell guns in Minnesota, and I have no problem with people who responsibly sell guns because it's legal to do. But you've got to make sure that you're not selling to a trafficker. And you've got to take the due diligence to do that. And if somebody just shows up and if they got the money, then you give them the gun and that's all you care, then you're not doing your duty. And all of us need to insist that if you're going to be in the business of selling guns, you have to sell them responsibly. And if you buy a gun, you're saying that you're using this for your own personal use. But if somebody, we're going to be able to show that somebody sold as many as 37 guns to a couple of people within a few weeks, and it is in no reasonable adult would believe that they were for personal use. And by the way, there's this young woman by the name of Markeisha Wiley. Anybody remember Markeisha Wiley? She was 26-year-old veterinary technician. Her job was to take care of kittens and puppies. That was her employment. And she just was out on the town, 26 years old, partying with some friends. And two guys decided to settle their scores, shot at each other, missed each other, hit her, hit 15 other people. She died on the scene. And yet there was one of these Fleet Farm guns found on the scene. They got to explain that. And so, and then we're suing Glock. Glock markets machine guns, which are illegal to you and me. Well, how could they market something that's illegal to you and me? Because they market the semi-automatic weapon, which you can convert into a machine gun with a $10 piece of plastic. And they know it. In fact, they're called Glock switches. And if you talk, and if Brian O'Hara was up here, he would tell you that because of the shot spotter technology that we have, where you can locate where guns are being used, pretty small area, that it's only within the last few years that we saw these automatic weapons being used on the streets of American cities, including Minneapolis, and it's all because of these Glock switches. So we're suing Glock. We're not trying to shut Glock down. We're saying you must change your design so that people cannot use a piece of plastic, convert your gun to a machine gun. And so that's what we're doing. And we're going to do more. And we're also defending a lot of Minnesota laws. There's Minnesota laws that said that, if you have a domestic violence case, that we can deprive you of your firearm, at least until the resolution of the matter. People have challenged that in court. So I'll stop there, but this is a top priority for us. So
it kind of gets to like a question I had just of, you've been AG now for a couple of terms, you're running again. Why do you kind of...
1.5. Yeah.
What's that?
1.5.
1.5, sorry.
Terms. Yeah.
Sorry. But yeah, pretty soon, you're getting there. So like, why do you, I guess like when I was asking about guns, I was thinking of like, what power do you have to address like the biggest issues of our day, and like why do you think like state attorney general is kind of the best forum for you to address issues as opposed to like running for the legislature again, running for governor, some other type of public service?
Well, let me tell you, some of you, I got some dear friends in the audience. Good to see y'all. Some of you, my dear friends, said, Keith, are you crazy and have you lost your mind? When I decided to leave Congress and go to be the AG and run for AG. And what I saw is that when it came to tobacco, remember tobacco? Skip Humphrey really helped change the game when it comes to tobacco in America. There was a time when you'd see commercials, 4 out of 5 doctors smoke Pall-Malls, right? And, Joe Camel and all this garbage. And so it was really state AGs that changed the game on that.
Yeah.
And I'll just tell you, Walter Mondale, beloved in this room, am I right? Before he went to his reward, I said, hey, Mr. Vice President, I'm running for AG. Would you consider supporting me? He says, sure, Keith, I'll support you. But let me tell you this. And by the way, we were over there at Manny's Steakhouse, and he has a little booth that has his name on it. Anyway, he goes, I've been the ambassador to Japan. Cool job. I've been the vice president. I've been the U.S. senator. The funnest job I ever had was attorney general. He said, you're right to want to do that job. And so it's been a great pleasure. And I don't think people should be in office forever. That's one of the reasons I left Congress, give somebody else a chance. But given the state of the nation, I'm not here to make any public announcements or anything. That'll come in a few days, but but I think that there are good reasons to stay in the AG's office, or so I'll say that.
Do you see at all the TikTok issue as like the tobacco issue of our day?
I do think the TikTok issue is analogous, but I think what's more analogous is the opioid issue. I think the opioid issue connected to the fentanyl issue is kind of the equivalent, if not even worse, than the tobacco issue. The opioid issue has claimed so many lives here in Minnesota, across the country, and when people can't get the Oxycontin anymore, then they go on the street and maybe might pick up heroin or something, and it has destroyed many, many, many people's lives, and for even those who survive, just the cost of ERs and things like that that to me is the equivalent tragedy.
I'm going to get to a couple of audience questions here in the time we have left. I liked this question: what gives you hope?
This is going to sound corny, but you do, really, I mean that. And the reason why is that here you are, there's a beautiful, glorious fall day in Minnesota, right? We're not going to have too many more nights like this, are we? But here you are in a dark church pew, studying and thinking about the most critical issues in our community. That says something good about Minnesota. So many people really, really care, and like I said, I do believe, and I don't think I'm being alarmist, that our democracy is imperiled. And I think that has to do with, I think I got to do my job, but American democracy will be saved by the American people who stand up and are counted when necessary. And that is what I see you doing right here, right now. And I'm going to be at Gold Medal Park on October 18th for the No Kings rally. I'll be there. I hope some of you all can make it, and bring your signs. Handmade signs, definitely welcome. And again, the very day that Melissa Hortman, is a dear friend of mine, loved her, just loved her. She was just the best. That day was the last No Kings rally. And I was very proud of the governor doing all he could do to help find this bad, horrible person. But me personally, I decided to go to the rally. And let me tell you, the reason why is because I didn't want Minnesotans to be out there and they didn't get some comfort and some support from at least one of their elected officials. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with the people who didn't go because they were actually very busy doing other things, but somebody needed to. Mm-hmm. So I just assigned myself that duty that day. So what gives me hope? The fact that you still love this country and are willing to stand up for it.
And in terms of kind of a topical issue on that point, one person actually did ask about National Guard deployment. Right. Portland did National Guard deployment, I think today. And so right. What is your plan if the National Guard descends on Minneapolis? We
will sue immediately. If Donald Trump tries to usurp the authority of the National Guard from the governor, we will be in court right away. And look, there's a lot of reasons why this is an extremely bad. First of all, if the authority exists to essentially invoke the Insurrection Act or violate posse comitatus, it is in the case of an emergency. If there is an emergency, I trust Tim Walz to make that decision and to do what's necessary in that situation. I don't trust Donald Trump. We know that D.C. crime was at a 30-year low. So is Chicago. So is California. Mm-hmm. This is all a pretext. And here's another thing you may not have thought about. Maybe you have. The last time we sent National Guard off on a presidential adventure was 2005. The Louisiana National Guard was in Iraq when Katrina hit. Mm-hmm. Where did they need to be? I think they needed to be trying to maintain the levee. Well, they weren't there to do that. It is a bad idea to politicize the Guard. They took the National Guard from Ohio, Mississippi, Louisiana, and sent them to Washington, D.C. to walk around the National Mall, I don't know, and observe all the kids who play softball or touch football or something like that. But people are telling me they're not being used well. That's not what those kids joined the National Guard for, and they're not necessary in D.C. And by the way, there's plenty of state and local collaboration we can do. We need to be working with the FBI, USATF to get these guns off the street. There are tons of legitimate points of collaboration, but the National Guard is not trained to do policing. That's not what they do. And you know, in England, they call them the bobbies. You know that? Well, they call them the bobbies after a guy named Robert Peel. And Robert Peel really modernized policing and helped establish the first modern police department in London and Manchester because you had some hungry, out-of-work people in Britain who were, upset, out of control, and there were food riots. And then they used the military to suppress them. And it was decided by people who have some common sense that, look, we need to have another kind of force do this because this force that needs to be of the people, some trust with the people, some currency with the people, and they shouldn't be people whose job it is to fight and win war, which is what the job of a soldier is. Mm-hmm. And so it's different roles. I'm telling you, Trump keeps doing this stuff and you're going to end up with a Kent State situation. And it's going to be tragic and it's going to be horrible. And I'm not sure that's not what he wants. So I say, be very disciplined on the nonviolent protest. Very disciplined. But you must protest. And if Trump sends the Guard here, we'll be in court, making them, holding them accountable.
What do you kind of, So Trump issues dozens of executive actions. You file dozens of lawsuits. Is that democracy? Like, is that like a form of democracy of like executive action and then like civil lawsuit? Like, how does that compare to like the founder's idea of democracy, your idea of democracy?
It is democracy that states who have the 10th Amendment, which means that anything not specifically designated to the feds is to the states. And we have the right, we're a sovereign state. We have the right to challenge the federal government. We go to court eyeball to eyeball with the federal government. So it is democracy to use the judicial systems to sort out disputes between state and federal government. But I would say that it is, while it is democracy, it also represents democracy at the breaking point. And the reason why is every one of us puts our hand up and we swear to uphold the Constitution. You don't swear an oath to the president. You don't swear an oath to the governor. You swear to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And when the 14th Amendment says people are citizens of the states they're born or naturalized in, and the president says, I don't like that, I'm doing something else, the fact that we have to go to court to vindicate that principle, yeah, it's democracy. Thank goodness we have courts that can adjudicate that, but it's really a shame that we have to adjudicate that. I mean, some things are just, the idea that we have a separation of powers, that Congress says, here's the money, power of the purse, go do good. And the states go do it, and the federal government says, you know what? I know a president has signed this bill. I know the bill has gone through 2 houses of Congress. I know it's been marked up in committee. I don't care. I'm going to decide what's going to happen with this money. So we have 3 branches of government. What happens when one branch controls all the military and all the force and all the purse and has the judges under their thumb? What is that called? Bam.
Yeah.
You know?
So that actually leads to probably our final question before we need to wrap up, which I think you kind of just partly answered. This is from a high school teacher. What should be taught in high school civics now that usually isn't?
What should be taught in high school civics that usually isn't? Well, the fundamental thing to be taught is that the Constitution and our rights live through people. And if we don't stand on them, they can easily be taken away. If we will not lift up our voices and even sometimes put our bodies on the line, we can have the prettiest Constitution and all the flowery language, and it won't mean a damn thing. That's what the most important thing is. You can read the words, but you got to know what they mean. You got to live what they mean. And right now, when a comedian can be torn off the air by the FCC chair because he cracked a joke, we've got to insist on the right to tell jokes. You know, and so this is really the thing that comes to mind to me. And I would just say that I believe that, look, our nation has faced tough times before. The Civil War was kind of a hard one. And there are other ones along the way. We will get through this. But it won't be because somebody waves a magic wand. It'll be because all of us in this room and many, many more insist that we're going to have constitutional government and rule of law. That's what's going to happen. And if I may say so, everybody here has different levels of interest. I got a good friend here who's like an expert in like film, right? And she puts on films, Minnesota Film Society. Well, one of the things she's doing is making sure that there are thought-provoking films out there so you can go watch them and have some dialogue. Film may not be your thing. Maybe you and your friends are going to have a book club and read some stuff by Timothy Snyder, right? Or Erica Chenoweth, Or maybe you are going to go to that march on October 18th, or maybe you're going to sue. But whatever you do, do it. Do not be found not doing anything to protect democracy. And you can protect it by writing a song, by writing a poem, by screening a film. All of these things are going to add up to protecting this country. And I know, I wish I was exaggerating. I promise you I'm not. And that's where it's at right now. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.